From a comical clown to tolerated dramatic sideman, Bob Odenkirk went through the motions, and in his book, Comedy, Drama, he relays the time he spent in the comedy trenches and start off with a warning that we all hold failure in our hands, the bad breaks. He speaks about his floundering with jest and humour and invites us to laugh at it. He mentions all the projects that we've never heard of and never came to be known, the pilots, the outlines, the presentations, the stumbles, the dead ends, the moonshots that ended up under a pile of rocks. Yet, he's learned the lessons and through pithy truisms recounts and shares those experiences with us. He admits that he tried just as hard at the stuff that didn't work as he did at the stuff that worked. Being single-minded, he started pursuing his love for sketch comedy and embraced it wholeheartedly for decades, until drama came knocking, but first saw it as a weird carrot and never gave it much thought. It's a strange trajectory that his journey has taken. Making comedy didn't qualify as a calling or a job or work, much less a career, but college was ending and a choice would have to be made, and this awareness of what he'd been doing with his time made him curious if he should try. He fell in love with sketch comedy, Monty Python, Woody Allen, Steve Martin, and some really obscure stuff. Improvisation seemed a way into this world of sketch, and improv seemed a swift way in. With improv, there wasn't a need to hone skills, but simply to learn some exercises. To Bob, the best comedy has an anger in it, anger that is being used for laughter. He started off doing weekly radio comedy shows. He called it the Primetime Special, random comedy of bits he would write, record and riff live on the radio for an audience of no one. He wrote sketches all week, pre-recorded some and riffed others, and played a few songs to kill 4 hours. Eventually, Bob decided to move to Chicago and study improv at one of the most respected schools in the country, Second City. He was working alongside a community of hardcore improvisers, which gave him plenty of opportunity to learn and grow towards what he really loved doing. Although improv came across as a weaker version of sketch comedy, the speed with which he could generate it and the forgiving quality of the audience towards it was a big plus. It allowed Bob, an unseasoned performer, to flex his creative juices and test it out on an audience in fringe plays. Fringe comedy therefore lived on the fringes for a reason, and that's where Bob aimed for, never the middle. His artistic life came to be through the freedom of being able to write and perform, and then sit around and talk about writing and performing, which was his favorite part and possibly where he learned the most. Being a great comedian doesn't work in a classroom situation. One has to go on stage to fail and learn, and Bob was lucky during that period to be able to make use of stage time and perform in front of an audience. Then on to New York to become a sketch comedy writer for Saturday Night Live, where he'd be working 6 days a week, churning out material for Saturday's night's performance, and Sunday would be his day to wander Central Park, numb, looking for scraps of comic premise for the next week. He would sometimes venture into the old improv comedy clubs to do a set just to get some laughs to refill his cup, even just a little. If we were to convert Bob's abilities for writing sketch comedy to school grades, he'd probably get a C- for the material and an A for an effort, but he was kept on for 3 years at Saturday Night Live to keep pounding out sketch comedy and to grasp the tricks of the trade. At one point, he agreed to stage a show at Second City while still writing for Saturday Night Live, and then to open that show and perform in it. He didn't tell the management that he was going in for this double dip. So, after Wednesday's read-through at Saturday Night Live, he'd fly to Chicago and arrive there at the theatre in time to do the improv set at Second City. He'd stay there for Thursday and Friday, doing writing meetings with the cast during the day, join the improv set at night, and then on Saturday fly back to New York and go back to Saturday Night Live to put the final touches to the week's episode. Working at Second City pointed Bob in the right direction he needed to go. Creating his own material and at least having the chance to perform, which squared the circle for him. He revered writing, but performing completed the journey. It was a payoff for the pain of writing. Bob eventually realized that he wanted what every comedy writer wants, his own damn show. He owed Saturday Night Live so much and had quietly and excruciatingly learned the components of a good sketch and developed a sense of structure that gave him confidence Therefore, he took his diploma and ran to LA. Meeting up with Ben Stiller and Janine Garofalo, Bob joined their team and they set off to write comedy sketches for the Ben Stiller show. They were all young tastemakers with extremely strong opinions about comedy and a sense of what was wrong and old and lame about network comedy. Plus, combined with the fact that they'd probably be cancelled, gave the show a certain freedom. None of them would compromise at all. He finally got the proper acting break performing on the Larry Sanders Show with Gary Shandling, and it was the first time he got to know the pleasure of being just an actor, needing to know his lines and say them in the right order. The fun of having any real responsibility outside of pretending was new to him, and it was a great benefit of an acting gig, excusing himself from reality. When Bob met David Cross, a stand-up comedian, they both dug each other. They were very different people. David was funnier than Bob, but most importantly, them working together, they always landed on what was funniest about an idea and about the approach to the idea, and then knew how to wrestle the idea into submission and tickle the laughs out of it. It was a comedic marriage made in heaven, and it only took them a year and a half to survive the development process on the greatest little sketch show known as Mr. Show with Bob and David. Working with David, who was driven and exact, could take its toll. Bob would subconsciously fight what David was teaching him. The idea of taking a completed sketch that he spent a couple of days working on and getting rid of all of it except that one line of dialogue and throwing everything else away and going back to his computer for more days and creating an entirely new sketch around the one line was absurd to Bob. But Bob appreciated where David came from because that's how much work was needed to be done to get it right. They invested their own funds to make short film sketches to begin with, and every 2 months for the next year and a half they would do a live show with film pieces interconnecting with the live performance and stuff, showing everyone exactly what they wanted to do on TV. After 6 months and 3 shows, they were in debt. Bob's 3 steps to success in show business boil down to these 3. 1. Persistence. 2. Begging. And 3. Waiting, then starting again from the top. Back then, nobody wanted a sketch show. They were all full of ideas, and the audience didn't watch TV for the ideas. It's almost like they wanted to fail. Then HBO came knocking, believing in their sketch show, a show that is completely new and different every week. No structure at all, no intro, no theme songs, no rules, just ideas. Delightful ideas flowing past like a rushing river, and then abruptly the show ends. No goodbyes, no apology, no explanations. Thanks to Bob's mentor Bernie Brillstein, the suggestion came that they should have a modicum of structure and personality to it. They didn't have to hold the audience's hand, but if they could just bother to wave hello to them at the start, that seemed to have clinched the deal with the exec at HBO, who stood behind it and said whatever they do to make it something they would never see on regular TV. It didn't matter if people actually watch the show, just so long as they think they should watch it. In other words, HBO was saying, the hell with the ratings, make something worth talking about. Mr. Show never chased the audience, and they never caught them either. The show was built for cultish love, and it succeeded. They wanted only the out crowd, the few, the proud, the misanthropes. The greatest impact was in inspiring young performers and writers to like a sketch a little more and mislead them into following their passions. Over the following years, Bob got to not just act but also direct in several TV shows and feature films. He eventually got to fall in love with acting. He learned that to survive Hollywood beatdown was to keep moving new things in spite of every no. To somehow stay in touch with the joy that brought him into the game. He never stopped getting on stand-up stages or doing one-off shows. As always, the Fringe was where he felt most at home. When he got the audition for Breaking Bad to play Saul Goodman, Bob was slightly intimidated with having to learn so many lines, but he pretended not to be while preparing for that first go-round. He started like a writer would, but reversed engineering the script, taking apart the dialogue for text, subtext, rhythm, humor, and just who was this guy? Bob would treat the project in a whole different way from all the comedy he'd done his whole life, to respect the word and let the character talk in sometimes strange constructions. This way, he believed he might end up losing himself even more, because Saul was someone who didn't talk like Bob. He let the words be just as they were and worked hard to memorize them just like that. Nobody told him to play it bigger, and he felt dialed in. There's more shouting in comedy, and it was real nice to be able to whisper. He tried not to psych himself out about the shift he'd made from sketch comedy to this world of dark drama. There was something zen about the experience, losing himself in the moment, even if that moment was fraught with tension, frustration and manipulation. There was a joke of spin-off, and lo and behold, the executives of Breaking Bad asked Bob if he would consider doing the show Better Call Saul. At first, Bob refused due to wanting to spend more time with his kids, but eventually his kids managed to convince him to go ahead and do the show, since he'd disappoint a lot of people if he didn't. Bob, of course, couldn't object to that. Plus, if the show weren't to be as successful as Breaking Bad, it would be an interesting experiment. But the biggest reason for Bob saying yes to the offer was what he'd learned from all those years before from his mentors in comedy. To do something hard, something that one will probably fail at, something that tests one and excites one and takes one to places one didn't know one would ever go to. To prepare for his role as Saul in the show, Bob decided to gain some acting tips from Bryan Cranston on how to prepare for his role. Bryan gave him a summation of his daily schedule on Breaking Bad. You get up really early, get to set and start running your part. Then at lunch, you memorize your lines for the afternoon scenes. Don't eat too much. You want to keep your energy up. Then, before shooting day's over, have craft service prepare you a sandwich for dinner so you can take it home and focus on learning your lines for the next day. So, basically, Bob had to learn lines, rehearse, act, eat some food, learn lines, act again, cram some more food, then learn lines and fall asleep. He referred to it as a Cranston one-step acting system, work all the time. With the success of Better Call Saul, Bob went on to play a lead in an action movie, Nobody, and also smaller roles in drama films including The Post and Little Women. His advice to young and upcoming actors or writers for that matter is to make more friends than enemies, since it takes a village to get projects made. Bob's idea of a dream week would go as follows: 2 days acting in a drama, 3 days writing and acting in a comedy, and 2 more days of half drama, half comedy each, and 1 long night shooting an action sequence on a cold bus in Winnipeg. No weekend required.